You're not lazy. You're not evil. But somehow you keep putting things off. And it's costing you more than you realize. Every day you delay, a dream dies. A calling crumbles. And time wasted is killing your potential. Today, I'm going to talk about procrastination and why it leads to destruction that you can't always see until it's too late. I'll share with you a story that reveals how tiny delays become tragic results. And more importantly, what to do about it starting today. I used to think that procrastination was just about bad time management. And then I thought, well, maybe people need a new planner. They need a new calendar. They need a better app. But then I read this story that I'm going to share with you. And it felt like God held up a mirror. And I realized that it's not about a calendar, but it's more about character. We don't need another productivity hack. We need a spiritual wake up. Let's be real. We've all delayed what matters. That conversation that you know we need to have. That goal that we've been sitting on for months now. That spiritual habit that we keep saying that we'll get back to it. It doesn't look dangerous, but ignoring it is like ignoring a leaky roof. The damage adds up quietly, gradually, and seriously. And so I'm going to share with you this story in the book of Proverbs. And it's Proverbs chapter 24, starting in verse 30. It says, I walk by the field of a lazy person, the vineyard of one with no common sense. I saw that it was overgrown with nettles. It was covered with weeds, and its walls were broken down. Then, as I looked and thought about it, I learned this lesson. A little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, then poverty will pounce on you like a bandit. Scarcity will attack you like an armed robber. Now, when I read this, I was like, oh my God. I knew procrastination was something that, can keep you from accomplishing things. But I'd never thought of it like this. And at the end of all of it, says it ends in poverty. It ends in scarcity. It ends in lack. And so let's discuss this. Let's talk about this. It says that the writer of this, it just says that he says, I walk by the field of a lazy person, the vineyard of one with no common sense. And so he says this person is a lazy person, and it seems like this person has no common sense. Now let's pause right there. I don't think that he was judging this person here. I think he's just observing. And what does he notice? He noticed a field and a vineyard. Now, that may not mean anything to you, but back in that day, a field or a vineyard mean a lot. This means a field or vineyard was if a person had a field or a vineyard, it means that they had some money, they had some means, because back then, what determined wealth was whoever had land. If you had land, most likely you had some wealth, some type of wealth, if you had land. And if you didn't have land, you were in poverty. And so that was kind of the difference between people who were in poverty and people who were wealthy. Because in the Bible days, you basically only had two classes of people. You had poor or low class, and then you had the upper class, the wealthy. And that was the difference between who had land and who didn't. And so there was no middle class. Now, so this says everything. This person had a field and they had a vineyard. That means that this man had something that was valuable. He was not broke. He was not cursed. He had potential. He had property. But he also had a problem. And that problem was neglect. And so there's this story about a company that was thriving. This company was thriving. In their prime, they led their industry. But somehow they stopped innovating. And they delayed key updates that they needed to make. They started ignoring customer feedback. And they postponed changes that needed to be made. And so this company that was thriving eventually eventually, guess what happened? Eventually, they filed for bankruptcy. Not because they didn't have what it took. They were leading in their industry. It's not because they didn't have what it took. It was because they didn't take care of what they had, right? They had something, and then they failed to take care of what they already had. And so just like this field, they didn't fail from failure, but they failed because it was a failure to act and keep doing what they already were doing. And so he says, I saw that this field was overgrown with nettles. It was covered with weeds, and the walls were broken down. So the land was overgrown, weeds everywhere, bushes everywhere. It was overgrown. And then the walls were broken down. Now, what does walls mean? These walls have a significance in the scriptures. Walls meant protection. And so he said the walls were broken, they were torn down. And so walls meant protection in that time. A wall was everything. No wall equals no defense. And so a wall meant defense. It meant safety. It meant it was a boundary. You know, it was walls were like a fortress. And so it was safety. It's just like your house. If you didn't have walls in your house, you wouldn't be protected. You wouldn't have any boundaries. Anybody could just walk in. And so the same with this vineyard, with this land, the walls were broken down. Now, psychologists talk about mental fences. It's boundaries that protect your peace. And so when you procrastinate, those fences, they start to weaken. And soon anxiety creeps in, self-doubt creeps in, shame creeps in, and it's not overnight, but it's little by little. And so procrastination, it's an invitation to destruction. When you procrastinate, you are inviting destruction into your life. Wow. You know, and so that's a whole new perspective on procrastination. And then he says, then I looked and I thought about it. He says, and I learned this lesson from looking at this vineyard, this broken down, weeds everywhere. He said, I looked at it and I learned a lesson. Now this is key. He said, I learned something from this. And so he wasn't just looking, he wasn't just judging, he learned something. You see, and how many of us learn from what we're looking at? Instead of judging everything, why don't you learn something from it? Like, instead of just rushing to judgment, think about what you can learn from this. That's a thought. So he didn't just look, he learned something from it. He took a lesson from this. I remember meeting a man who had wasted like 10 years of his life with addiction to drugs. And he told me that he said it didn't start out with drugs. He said, man, I didn't start out with drugs. He said it started with a decision or decisions that I was delaying. That's what he said. It started with decisions that he was delaying. And he realized that after, looking back on it, he realized that. And he said, one compromise, one excuse, one more tomorrow. And suddenly he was stuck in sadness. And so you got to think about this. Reflection is not just about remembering the past. It's about receiving the warning. And so this verse tells us that if you don't learn from neglect, then you'll live in regret. And then he says, a little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, then poverty will pounce on you like a bandit. And then scarcity will attack you like an armed robber. I'm like, are we still talking about procrastination here? Is this procrastination? He's saying procrastination will lead to poverty. Poverty pouncing on you like a bandit. And so, man, this is one of the most haunting warnings in Scripture. It is. It's a warning. Not because of a big rebellion, not because of just going against everything, not because of just doing something, some big wrong thing. No, just from procrastination, from neglect. Just a small resistance, just you continuing to resist doing what you know you need to be doing. Because if you look at this verse, it says a little of this and a little of that, and it's just a little. That's how dreams die. It's not just one big event that happens. It's dreams die from death by 1,000 cuts. Slowly but surely, you ignoring and not doing things that you know you should be doing. That's how your dreams die. It doesn't happen in one fell swoop. It's just over time, just neglect over time. You remember the story of about Kodak, the cameras, Kodak, the film, Kodak. At one time, Kodak was the king of photography. Kodak actually, believe it or not, Kodak actually invented the first digital camera in 1975. But guess what they did? They sat on it. This was the first digital camera. This was innovation at its finest. And they put it on the shelf. And they said, basically, we'll get to it later. And this is their thought. Well, right now our film sales are really good. So you still had to put the film in the camera. And they was like, we still selling all this film. So, let's just put that to the side for now. And the story. Somebody else developed that, and so a little delay, a little denial on their part. They were comfortable in what they were doing because they were successful. And so they were comfortable, they were successful, but they was completely unaware of what was coming. They were completely unaware of the digital revolution that was coming. And so years passed and digital took over. Now everything is digital. And guess what happened to Kodak? They filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Think about that. They were not lazy in their efforts. They created something, but they were just lazy in their execution. They did not act when it mattered most. And just like the man in Proverbs who folded his hands for a little extra rest, Kodak folded its strategy and poverty pounced on them like a bandit. And so here's my question for you. What are you postponing? What are you delaying? What are you sitting on? What do you keep pushing off till tomorrow? Is it a God-given vision? Is it a much needed conversation that you need to have with somebody? Is it a new discipline that you keep delaying? What is it? Because I'll tell you this, don't wait until the weeds take over and overgrow your field. Don't wait until the walls break down. Don't wait for a wake-up call. Start today. Make one decision. Take one step. Tear down all of the excuses and build back up your walls. In Proverbs 28:19, it says, whoever works his land will have plenty. Whoever works his land will have plenty. But the one who watches weeds grow up, they will never taste the harvest. And so with that, just imagine a community where believers who don't wait for motivation. They don't wait for motivation. They move with the mission. They don't need anybody to motivate them. They know what they need to do and they move with mission. Just imagine it. Imagine churches where people don't delay their calling, but they step into their calling. They don't wait. They don't procrastinate when they know that God is calling them to do something. They walk in their purpose, one step at a time. Imagine that. Imagine a world where procrastination does not rob us, but because we recognize the thief who has stolen our dreams before, we recognize that we don't procrastinate. Imagine that. You see, it starts with you. It starts with us. And it starts right now. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today about how to overcome procrastination, because it's doing more damage than you think. And so I hope this blessed you. I hope this helps you. I want to share what's helpful to you. And so I hope that this helps you. And so if it did, please share this message with somebody else. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.